coming, and this is, I think, our last class for this series, inshallah. And although it's the last, and I know the class previously, we saw the major victory of Salah ad-Din, the liberation of Jerusalem, a very happy, high point. And many people, when they try to speak about Salah ad-Din, that's the kind of the story. How he comes, he wins, he liberates Jerusalem, full stop, and end of the story. And this is far, far, far from the truth. Right? What the appearance of Salah ad-Din, as we said, the first thing is what? It's not a one-man show, it's a whole generation. Remember that? But the second, the main struggle of Salah ad-Din, for those who know a little bit better, is not that he opened Jerusalem. It's not just the Battle of Hattin. It's what happened next. Right? And this is what we're going to see today. Really, the character of Salah ad-Din, we saw last time how when he was victorious and he had power and he had strength, we saw the forgiveness and compassion and clemency and generosity and gentleness. And we saw that side of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, which is a very beautiful side of his character. Right? And it's something that we contemplate on ourselves. Yes, Muslims are oppressed, but I always wonder if Allah gives us strength and we overpower our enemies nowadays, what will we do? Will we be as bad as them? Will we do to them what they did to us, and therefore there is no difference? Or we will follow the model of Salah ad-Din, Umar ibn al-Khattab, and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But today we'll see another side, right? And the other side is when things become very difficult, in the time of calamities and afflictions, when you almost are almost in loss of hope, when you face impossible encounters, do we trade off our principles or not? Do we hold to our principles only because we're strong? It's very easy when I'm strong to say I'm a Muslim. I will not trade off. Islam is my deen. I'm in a position of strength and power. But if I'm in a position that I feel it's not as powerful, there is a threat, do I compromise or not? Right? And today we'll see this. It takes a true man of faith, not to compromise and to stay strong even in difficult situations. And what we'll see today is that, as we said last time, when Salah ad-Din liberated Jerusalem, right, and we spoke about that, the thing that happened is the news reached Europe, right? And we spoke about this before, the concept of a counterattack, right? So, news reached Europe. Salah ad-Din defeated the Crusaders in the Battle of Hattin, liberated Jerusalem, liberated most of the cities. And we said the Pope got a heart attack, right? But you can imagine what happened with the new Pope. He immediately contacts everybody in Europe, the necessity of what? Another crusade. We have to take back what Salah ad-Din took from us. And the response was immense. So Salah ad-Din is going to be facing a challenge, what I would call an impossible encounter. Because it's not going to be Salah ad-Din versus the Crusaders and the Franks in the Levant, Shem. It's going to be Europe united. It's going to be everything, England, France, Germany, Italy, Rome. Everybody in Europe is going to send troops towards Salah ad-Din. So it's going to be a showdown between Salah and the united forces of the whole European continent coming against him. So as we said last time, it started by what? It started by a letters. Letters started coming to Salah ad-Din from the kings of Europe. They started sending letters to him, warning that, don't think that you won. If you do not give back everything to us, we are going to come, all of us, and we're going to take from you not Jerusalem. It's not going to be just Jerusalem. We're going to take everything. This is the whole European countries, and we're not stopping this time. So it's going to be Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq. We're not stopping. The whole Europe is going to attack. So you either give Jerusalem back or else. And we said the response of Salah ad-Din, do you remember his response? His response was what? One line. He said, any one of you who would set foot on this land will meet the fate of his brothers in the Battle of Hattin. No, if you come, there is no compromise. I'll end up destroying the forces that comes, right? So he was completely, no negotiations at all. So it starts this way. But Salah ad-Din was, as we said, very wary of this. He's a very good strategist. So he understands that the threat is real. And he understands that the Franks are extremely committed and zealous people. And when they say we're going to do something, they're going really to do it. So Salah ad-Din then is going to face what, as the picture shows, right? All the armies are going to just pour onto him. So now, today we're going to discuss what happens in this episode, which I call the Battle of Akka, right? And the Third Crusade. So if you remember, before Salah ad-Din opens Jerusalem, we said he did something very strategic. He insisted on opening all the coastal cities, right? He didn't go for Jerusalem immediately. The first thing he did was what? Yafa, Asqalan, Akka. And his idea was what? He should not have a beachhead. I need to completely take the whole coast so that when they come, there is no city that they can land from. But one city resisted, if you remember, the city of Sur, with Conrad in it, right? And Salah ad-Din's opinion was, we should not go to Jerusalem till we free the city. But we said everybody told him what? You just go for Jerusalem and then later we'll take Sur. And you can guess what happened. People freed Jerusalem, winter started coming, the soldiers are like, we have to go back for our wives. Many soldiers started leaving, right? So he did try to take the city of Sur, and he didn't have the necessary amount of soldiers. And the idea was, okay, fine. Maybe after winter passes, when spring comes, I'll call the soldiers again and I'll attack Sur, right? So there was one city that was left, the city of Sur, right? And we said Salah ad-Din freed everybody, if you remember, right? For example, the king of Jerusalem he captured. He came and his wife came and said, Yani, my husband. And what did he say? He said, I'll release you, but you promise one thing. You do not fight against me. Yeah, I promise, he released him. The master of the Templars, same thing. I'll promise you do not fight against me. And he released him. Can I have new batteries for the... Yeah, because it's like... Also, he released many soldiers. He was very peaceful in taking the cities. Now, everybody that was released, including from the city of Jerusalem, a part went back to Europe. But everybody else, where do you think they went? It's obvious, right? The one city that remains, Sur. So it is said the city of Sur now was swarmed, right? To the extent there was not enough space in the city. And they started going outside of the city. And the numbers multiplied and multiplied and multiplied, and the king is there, and the master of the Templars are there, Conrad is there, everybody's amassing in Sur. News started coming from Europe that, reinforcements are going to be coming on a daily basis now. Like, expect ships daily, almost. You're going to have supplies, and Europe is coming. So at that point, something interesting happened, right? The king that promised not to fight Salah ad-Din, the master of the Templars, what do you think they did? They said, we have enough troops. Let's start. Reinforcements are coming, but the city is already full, right? So they started doing what? They started forming their campaign, and they started heading towards the city of Akka. Now, fortunately, Salah ad-Din, again, understanding that this is going to happen, he asked Baha'u'ddin Qarakosh, one of the people that really is excellent in building fortifications. If you ever go to Egypt, okay. Jazakumullah khair. Yeah, thank you. Jazakumullah khair. If you ever go to Egypt, one of the monuments in Egypt is what we call Al-Qal'a, the citadel of Salah ad-Din, right? And that was built by Baha'u'ddin Qarakosh. So he asked Baha'u'ddin to leave Cairo, come to Akka specifically. And he told him, this city I want to strengthen its fortification. So Baha'u'ddin really took very good care of what the fortification of the city of Akka. And that you will see crucial now, right? He had Baha'u'ddin and some of his soldiers in Akka, and Salah ad-Din is away, and the news reaches Salah ad-Din. About what? The Franks, news started coming to him, huge army, left Sur and is heading towards the city of Akka. And Salah ad-Din, again, understanding what's going on, understanding the consequences of this, he orders everybody, come, and we have to meet them immediately. So he starts gathering his troops, right? And everybody calling all his emirs. Remember when he opened cities, he had a slogan, I don't know if you remember that. When he used to open like Mosul or cities like that, he would say, I don't want the cities for the wealth of the city. I want the city for the men in the city. So he would keep rulers on their posts, but he had one condition. If I ask you to come, because there is a fight, you come. So he started sending to different rulers, bring your troops in. And the army of Salah ad-Din started forming. And now we will have an epic battle that shows the resolve of Salah ad-Din. It's called the Battle of Akka. This Battle of Akka is between 2 to 3 years. It's not a couple of months. They say it's the longest siege in the medieval times. So this battle, by all accounts, whether Muslim or Christian, it's horrific what happened in that battle. And we have details of that, right? So Salah ad-Din immediately moves to the city of Akka to find out what the city has been already surrounded. So you have his troops in Akka surrounded by the Franks, and now Salah ad-Din army comes and surrounds so you have Muslim troops surrounded by the Frankish troops, surrounded by Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. And Salah ad-Din does something really interesting. It shows you also his character. He starts to coordinate the attack. And he says, we are going to start our attack. Which day you think he picked? This was something he always did. Was very careful with, right? So you surrounded them, the army is like, you get prepared, right? And now what time are you going to pick to start the attack? Which time do you think? Friday. He picks Friday, right? We're going to start the attack on Friday. Why? I'm going to send to every single masjid, every single scholar in all the cities. So Muslims, when you're doing Friday prayers, I'm going to be starting the attack. So while you're praying, I'm fighting. So please make dua for us. Because your dua has an effect. I want you to imagine the unity, how Muslims would feel. That you're literally sitting in a Friday prayer knowing that at this moment, over there, Salah ad-Din is starting his attack and your dua is requested. Right? And again, the hearts of the Muslims everywhere, including Mecca and Medina, can you imagine? And now Al-Quds. So you have all the Muslims together in Jum'ah prayer, everybody raising his hands, asking for victory for the Muslims. And Salah ad-Din started attacking the Franks. And the thing that he noticed, the numbers were drastic. It wasn't 20, 30, so many. And an attack started, it said the whole day. But it ended up, the day passed and nothing happened. A lot of killing, a lot of, bloodshed, but the Franks stood their position. He could not break the siege. And Salah ad-Din, it is said he was so disturbed because of this. He started fasting. He almost didn't eat anything. Saturday, Sunday, attack after attack after attack, and they persisted. A day, 2, 3. It was a very difficult battle. Till, I think it was the third day, when it's his nephew, Taqi ad-Din, this young man, the hero of Hittin, right? He switched strategies. He gathered the strongest of the forces of Salah ad-Din, and instead of attacking everywhere, he focused the attack on one point. This is a technique that in strategy, when you have any siege, right, you don't attack everywhere. You gather a superior force and you attack only one point. Why? You want to make a break, right? So he decides to attack by the beach. A battle by the beach. I just want you to imagine in the sand, with the iron, with the heat. Can you imagine the scene, right? And you have the ships on one side. I mean, it's also a naval battle. You have his ships fighting the Franks' ships, and land and sea together, and a huge battle happened that day. And by Allah's grace, it said Taqi ad-Din finally succeeds in pushing them and reaching the city of Akka. He defeated them, but he managed to do what? After this attack, to break their forces here. So a path was created between Salah ad-Din forces and the surrounded people in Akka. And it is said, Ibn Shaddad said, Salah ad-Din started sending reinforcements and weapons and arrows and food, And then people were feeling good, Alhamdulillah, tomorrow we're going to start the attack again from inside and outside, and we're going to win, right? But attacks, the Franks started to fortify their positions, and next day they attack and they are not leaving. And a pattern started to develop. The pattern was the following. Muslims, they pray Salat al-Fajr, right? And after Salat al-Fajr, they get their forces ready, and then they attack. And the Franks will defend, right? Till the evening time, and what happens? Everybody goes to their camp, and they rest. Next day, Salat al-Fajr, adhan, you can hear the adhan, and you know what's going to happen. The Muslims are going to pray, and then what? They're going to get their troops ready, and then they attack. A day, 2, 3, a week passed. And it's the same pattern, and there is no development. But then something interesting happened. They noticed a pattern. The Franks, and it's very dangerous to be predictable. And this, again, I want you to understand this lesson, right? So now there is a pattern. There is a predictability element, right? I know what you're going to do tomorrow. So they did what? They did something you would expect your enemy to do. I'll do something unexpected. You're expecting me, I'm going to defend. They switched strategies. They said, okay, next day, while they're praying Salat al-Fajr, we will attack. Right? Because they're not used to this. And that's exactly what they did. And which part do you think they attacked? Salah ad-Din is at the center, Taqi ad-Din is in the north, Kokbri is in the, and Saif ad-Din al-Hikari is in the south. Which part would they attack? Which part would you guess? Which one? Salah ad-Din? The center? South, possible, right? But their head was the north. They wanted what? They wanted to cut the city. They wanted the city to, because that's how you starve people, right? So they said their biggest thing, Taqi ad-Din, is the one that pushes against us, right? If we can take him and we surround the city, it's a win. So Fajr time, they gathered all their forces. The Muslims are still not ready. They're still praying, getting together. And the knights of the Franks charged, especially the Templars and the, mighty knights, right? And they charged, and the Muslims were not ready yet for this. So it said once they attacked, they started pushing Taqi ad-Din's. I don't know what happened to the slides. They attacked and they pushed. I'll just show it here. They attacked and they started pushing the positions of Taqi ad-Din back. And it was almost like a defeat. And the Muslims started to get crushed, and the Franks went all the way, and Taqi ad-Din started retreating. When Salah ad-Din saw this, something very interesting happened. He ordered his special troops in the center to at once leave and go help Taqi ad-Din. Right? Now, it is said Taqi ad-Din, it wasn't a defeat. What he wanted is he wanted to lure them out. So he was retreating for what purpose? Okay, let them go away. Let's drag them out so we can surround them. But Salah ad-Din, when he saw that, he thought he's being defeated. So he ordered his main troops in the center around him to leave right away, and this is the strongest of the division of the army, to leave the central position and to go help Taqi ad-Din. Right? And indeed, when this happened, of course, the position of Taqi ad-Din became good. But something unexpected happened. The Franks noticed Salah ad-Din himself is exposed. His best troops left him. He has only some volunteers troops. So they ordered everybody in the center and the remaining of the troops to start charging towards Salah ad-Din himself. And one of the biggest battles happened in that day. Because that's the Sultan, that's Salah ad-Din himself. If you defeat Salah ad-Din, the whole army will, you're done. And they charged against the positions of Salah ad-Din. And the remainder troops that he had weren't his special troops. So they could not stand the attack. They're volunteers. So they started running away. And Ibn Shaddad says, I saw the Sultan with very few of the people around him, standing by himself and asking the drummers to sound the drums, to signal everybody to come, telling people not to retreat. And I see people running away. And then Salah ad-Din realized his people is running, he started retreating. And the Franks reached the tent of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi itself. And they killed one of the scholars there, right? And it looked, Salah ad-Din now started to back up, right? And it looked like this is going to be bad, right? Like the Muslims are getting defeated on both fronts, and this is the Sultan. If the Sultan gets defeated, what will happen to the rest of the army? Fortunately, a strategic move happened, and I will show you. So this is like he sent his troop north, right? They attack him, they push him back. But notice what happened. When the Muslim retreated, the knights started charging. So a gap was created between the knights and the infantry. And the knights now were what? Far further away from their camp. What saved the day is two things, completely unexpected. Salah ad-Din's people inside Akka, Baha'u'ddin Qarakosh, ordered the gates to be opened and he charged and he attacked them from the back, which was completely unexpected. He doesn't have much, it's 3,000, right? But the element of surprise, right? So you're charging, so he ordered that to happen. And then Taqiyuddin and Saifuddin al-Hikari, both of them, when they saw this and they saw a gap, they did what? Let's close that. Surround the knights. Because the infantry is on one side, the knights are on one side. So they did this very famous pincher movement, right? So they surrounded the knights. And then they started the infantry without their knights. A lot of death happened there. The knights found themselves isolated. And remember, this is, those are the Templars and the Hospitallers. We're speaking about very strong people. So it says a horrific battle happened that day, right? Those are the top knights of the Franks, and now they're surrounded. And it is said the battle lasted the whole day, and by the grace of Allah, it switched. Salah ad-Din ordered his troop to come back and attack from both sides. It was a horrific battle, and it was a major victory for the Muslims. It is said most of those knights actually died. Ibn Shaddad himself, he says, I was there, remember this is eyewitness, and he said, after the battle, I went and I started counting he's riding, and the way they do it, they have a rope. And they start tying knots. 1, 2, like they're counting. And he said, I started counting more than 10,000, more than 15,000. It was a lot of bodies. Right? So it was a horrific battle. A lot of death happened that day. And it was a major victory for the Muslims. But there was one problem. Summer, hot, bodies, heat, so much casualties. What do you think would happen? Yeah, you can guess what's going to happen next, right? And battle after battle after battle, a lot of death is happening. And this was a major victory for the Muslims, but the problem is now what? Disease, right? An epidemic started to strike. And the epidemic started spreading in both camps, the Muslim camp and the Franks camp. Which camp do you think got the most of it? We said that, if you remember. It was terrible on the Franks. Right? Muslims still had the epidemic, but they started dying almost 5 times more than the Muslims or something like. Why? Because of hygiene. Right? They're not clean, they don't wash. So the epidemic spread really badly in them. Right? And in the Muslims, it started to affect the Muslim army. And people started to fall sick, including some of the top commanders of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, and eventually the Sultan himself started to get sick. Right? It was in this epidemic actually that one of the greatest men of Salah ad-Din, who was actually one of the heroes of the past battle, al-Faqih Isa al-Hikari, if you remember that Faqih Imam man, right? He got sick and he died in that epidemic. And Salah ad-Din really grieved because this was the person that was with him since day one. He's a Faqih, he's a scholar, he's a brave knight, right? And he passes away in that epidemic. So it was very serious. Salah ad-Din is now losing some of his people. And now the Sultan himself is sick. And people are really worried. He's sick, he cannot fight, he's on the bed, said he can't sit properly, and they got the doctor of Salah ad-Din. The doctor of Salah ad-Din, do you know who he is? Very famous figure. Maimonides. You know who Maimonides is? One of the top theologians of the Jews is a Jewish theologian called Maimonides, right? Very famous. He was the doctor of Salah ad-Din. Which tells you, we oppress Jews. Says who, since when, right? Salah ad-Din doesn't oppress people like that. He's a good doctor, so Jew or a Muslim, he's the doctor of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyub, right? So anyway, he came and he was saying, this is not a place to stay. The epidemic is spreading, right? You cannot stay like that. People will die, including the Sultan himself. The only solution, you have to retreat. You have to retreat. There is a hill. Just go away from that land, take your troops away, and leave this area. You cannot stay here. People will start dying. It's not a safe area for you. Salah ad-Din's opinion was, what do you think his opinion was? He was like, I'm not leaving. Right? And everybody was telling him, you have to leave. What do you think are the opinions? His commanders, why are they telling him you have to back up? 2 reasons. One, of course, is the epidemic. But they told him something interesting. They said, look, the Franks, we surrounded them, right? And we killed so many of them, and their life is miserable in that camp. They're surrounded, they're attacked day and night. Now they have the epidemic. If you keep surrounding them, they can't leave. So they'll fight till the death. But we think, if you just back up and give them an opportunity, We think they had enough, you know what I mean? It's so miserable, they can't do anything. They will just leave. So give them that opportunity. Just back up, leave a room for them, and they leave and we're done. Salah ad-Din's opinion was, I don't think so. And he had a very interesting view of the Franks. He said those people are extremely dedicated, despite the miserable life they're living, in the heat and epidemic and attacks and death, and it's not an easy. Those people are so determined. If I leave them, they're not leaving. They're going to fortify their positions. They're going to take that opportunity that there is no attacks, and they're going to build fortifications, and it's going to be harder for us to attack them. And Salah ad-Din takes the opinion of everybody, and everybody tells him, you have to leave. So he orders his troops to do what? Retreat. And what do you think happened? Which opinion was? Again, the reason we're saying this, because we have to realize, sometimes the enemies of the Muslims, they're not weak. They're extremely dedicated people. They're fighting on faith. They were very zealous, right? They actually did not leave. They exactly did what Salah ad-Din did. So they started entrenching in a very interesting way. They started building fortifications on both sides, between them and the city and between them and Salah ad-Din. So they started to dig trenches, right? And then they took the mud and the sand, and they built like a barrier, a sand barrier between them and Salah ad-Din. And they started putting with small holes where they can come out, so they entrenched their position. So they became like surrounding the city with fortifications on both sides. And they stood in their position, despite the epidemic, despite the death that's coming, right? The one thing that alarmed Salah ad-Din and his soldiers is their numbers. Despite all the killings, their numbers seem not to diminish. So actually, in the last battle, they captured the master of the Templars. Remember the guy that Salah ad-Din released, and he said, I won't fight against you? He was captured. And Salah ad-Din asked, how many are you? And he responded, 120,000. And Ibn Shaddad and the scholars would say something very strange. We would fight them, and we would kill 10,000, and we would say, tomorrow we're going to finish them off. And he would say, we wake up in the morning to see different soldiers, meaning what? Different uniforms. Where did they come from? And then we would fight, and then we would kill so many, and we say, okay, good, maybe tomorrow we'll do something. And said, we wake up in the morning to find what? Completely different soldiers. Reinforcements started to come on a daily basis. So their numbers were swelling. And Al-Imad al-Asfahani says, he's very poetic. He says, our arrows would finish before the resupplies finish. They were supplied at a rate higher than the number of our arrows. You get, right? So it's very serious. So now Salah ad-Din sends to his troops in Egypt. He sends to his brother, bring everybody. Egypt now has an Egyptian army, right? A new one under Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. And he gets everybody in Egypt. They're not small, they're increasing. I need everybody. Get everyone, come yourself. Right? And he gives a speech to everybody. This is the enemy of Allah, surrounded the city of Akka, and we're the one responsible to uproot them. And I've gathered everybody. And you're the soldiers of Islam. And for my brother, I asked him to come. And then he looks to Allah. And he says, his dua was very beautiful. In the battles, he used to do the following. He would fight himself in the center, his children on the right side, and his brother on the left side. And he would tell, Ya Rabbi, you see, all my resources is here. My children are in the front line. My brother is in the front line. I'm in the center. All what I have is for you. Please bring victory to the Muslimin. He did not hold back anything, including his own family members. He would put them on the front lines, right? And then the Egyptian army finally came, right? To the aid of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, right? So when this happened, and we said, let me describe this battle for you quickly, right? So the Egyptian army comes, right? And to the surprise, as they're camping, right? The Franks attacked the army of Egypt. And a very interesting battle happened. They call it al-Waqa al-Adiliyya, right? Remember, Salah ad-Din is sick in the center. The Egyptian army just came, right? To be surprised by what? An attack. And it is said, again, the army just came. They were just, putting their camp together. And it's described, the Muslim camp is very, how can I put it? It's almost like a small city. It's not just soldiers. Putting their camp together, meaning what? There you have the bathrooms, you have the souq, the marketplace, you have the scholars, you have a place to pray, they're building. Like the souq al-askar and the judge, and because it's going to, this is a siege, it's going to take a long time, right? And then the Franks attack. And it is said, again, they were not ready, so they started being pushed back. And it is said, Salah ad-Din brother actually used a very interesting trick. He said, I know exactly what will happen. He said, okay, no. Continue to retreat. Let them go to the marketplace, our marketplace, and leave everything there. Don't take anything away. Leave everything, meaning what? All the merchandise. Just retreat, leave your merchandise. What do you think he's preparing? And I want you again, remember game theory, right? I know they're soldiers. If I retreat and I leave the marketplace with all the goods and all the valuable things there, what will their soldiers do? They'll be like, and again, so they attacked, the Muslims retreated, they went to the marketplace, and the soldiers saw like merchandise left and right. Here when you lose electricity or something, martial law, you know what I'm saying? Because people start looting all like Walmart and Costco and start bringing all the TVs out, right? So they go and there is a marketplace and the merchandise is unguarded. So the soldiers started doing what? Everybody started carrying things and starting going back. At this moment, Al-Adil tells all his army, like his knights, now charge. Right? At the same time, something very interesting happened in the camp of Salah ad-Din. When the news came that, your brother is under attack, the Egyptian forces are under attack and they're in a retreat. Ibn Shaddad says, I saw Salah ad-Din, he's sick, he can't stand. When the news came, he said, Salah ad-Din jumped, the sick man that cannot stand, he jumped, put his armor, ran and jumped onto his horse. And Ibn Shaddad was like he said, I was shocked. And Salah ad-Din kind of realized the look on Ibn Shaddad, like, you could not walk and now you're jumping on your horse and you're going. So he looked and he said a statement. He says, yes, إذا ركبت الجهاد زال الألم حتى أعود. When I ride for jihad fi sabilillah, all my pain is gone. I don't feel anything. It's like almost anesthesia for me. Till I come back, then all the pain comes back again. And so Salah ad-Din orders his forces to attack from his side. And again, a major battle happens. And by Allah's grace, the Franks were severely defeated in that battle again. Right? Major casualties on their side. But it's the same issue. The Muslims, although they're victorious, the reinforcements starts to come on a daily basis. So now there was a dilemma, right? That the Muslims, surrounding the Franks, they could not break the siege. The city has been surrounded for a long time. And by the way, I'm giving you a snippet of the battles. It's almost on a daily basis. And daily operations, whether naval, commando, this is a battle of 2 years. Right? So literally I can spend 2 hours telling you, they won, well, they brought their iron ram that they designed and they started ramming the door, and special troops went out and they burned it, and it's the battles in the sea, it's like daily battles between both camps, right? But the conclusion of this is what? Is that though Muslims were doing really well, but the news started coming, it's like the reinforcements are coming on a daily basis. And it's getting ridiculous. It's by the thousands and it's increasing. And now the news came that all what you faced is not yet the main forces. The main forces didn't arrive yet. And news came, the kings are about to arrive. Philippe Augustus, the king of France, his vanguard arrived. His vanguard was 10,000. This is just Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim to announce the arrival of our king, right? And he's coming with his ships following that. And then Richard the Lionheart is on his way with all, the English troops. He's arriving. And the worst part of it, the Germans. Frederick Barbarossa with 200,000. They landed in Asia Minor, and with the Seljuks, and the Seljuks could not stop them. Right? So they sent a letter to Salah ad-Din, we can't do anything. And now you have 200,000 coming by land. And Salah ad-Din was, what do you do with this? Do you get the idea? So now you have between the kings arriving at Akka and our forces are trying to surround them. I have news. They're coming from the land, from Turkey, and they're going to come to Sham area. And it's not 10,000, they're speaking 200,000. So he gathers his commanders. What should we do? And the opinion was, listen, you cannot, it's impossible. Yeah, I mean, what can you do? You either leave Akka, right, and go face the 200,000 to protect Shem, or leave the 200,000 and focus. I mean, we cannot, what can we do? And their opinion was, leave Akka. Khalas, let the city fall eventually. It's one city. We can't do anything. Let's face the 200,000. Let them take the city. And Salah ad-Din's opinion was, no, there is no compromise. I'll split the army. And I will stay myself to try to attack Akka. And he asked Taqi ad-Din, his nephew, take some of the best troops, go gather whatever you can, and you go and you face the 200,000 by yourself. And you can see like the odds, and people were speaking, the news where Shem will fall. Khalas, what are you going to do? And people started, this is not going to be about Akka, this is not going to be about Jerusalem, Halab, Aleppo, Mosul, Damascus. Now people are scared. Mosul, because you have 200,000. And the Germans, they describe them extremely dedicated people. When they came with their king, they swore they will not remove their armor till they liberate Jerusalem. They're going to sleep with it. They're wearing their armor, the chainmail, right? And then they in their view, this is their dedication, in their ideology, we get defeated because of our sins, right? So therefore, any person in our camp who's going to commit anything wrong, stealing, adultery, he will be put to death. That's how their dedication, right? And they're very strict. And they are insisting we're not going to rest till we liberate Jerusalem from Salah ad-Din. So we're speaking about also highly dedicated people. And Salah ad-Din was torn between what can I do? And even Ahmad al-Asfahani says, and I'll leave you to read the letter. Right, so this is the, so he sent, as we said, he sends Taqi ad-Din to meet the German forces coming from the north, right? That's what this is showing. And the news where the whole Sham is going to fall because this is a huge campaign. This is a letter that Ahmad al-Asfahani writes. He says when the news came, that 200,000 of the Germans are arriving, he said people were really disturbed. And he speaks about himself, that I was personally disturbed. And he describes other situations. Look what he writes. Whenever I thought about the news of the German army, I got distressed and anxious. But whenever I would go and look at the Sultan, I find from the strength of faith and reliance on God what would expand my chest and make me feel certain that victory will be for the Muslims. And they describe the Sultan, while this is happening, any other ruler, you will be you'd be worried. The stress and worry, anxiety, legitimate. He said Salah ad-Din was at peace. He had this certitude that, we're winning. Allah's not going to leave us. And he's at full peace, full submission, full dedication, to the extent that people that had anxiety, they didn't take Xanax. They just went and looked at Salah ad-Din. And by the way, it's very true. There are some scholars that if you go and sit with them, your anxiety just leaves. Their certitude, their peace is sufficient to affect us. So they were saying this, and he actually said in another instance, and Baha'u'ddin reported this, he said one day around Akka, it's when Richard arrived. When Richard, the king of Richard the Lionheart, was a big thing. As a matter of fact, the Franks used to threaten the Muslims with him. You say, you will see, we have a king that's coming in the battlefield, he's fierce. And you will see what he'll do when he comes, right? He said the moment that they came, they saw 70 ships, one by one coming, with troops coming from each one. And of course, the screams and elation on the camps of the Franks. And he said, I became very disturbed. The sight of 70 ships coming to the harbor, and with troops. He said, with every ship, I look to Salah ad-Din, and I see from his determination, resolve, certitude, that which makes me have no doubt that Islam is going to be victorious. It did not touch his heart. And this is something really, this is the test. Because by worldly calculations, you're losing. Right? Yet, his faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was so powerful, to the extent it showed with other people. Now at this point, Salah ad-Din starts sending letters to everybody. He realized this is not a battle of Salah ad-Din, this is not, he's fighting Europe. He's fighting everybody, right? And the reinforcements are so much. So he started doing what? The normal thing. Let me send letters to different places, right? So for example, you had Khurasan and Khawarizm, and this area, Central Asia, Pakistan, very strong people, right? So maybe they can help. Let me send a letter to the Khalifa. And he told the Khalifa what? Come yourself. Meaning what? I know you don't have much, but this is the battle of Islam. If you come by yourself, this will encourage the Muslims so much. And he said, I'll give you everything. You can lead, I'm one of your commanders. Your presence, come yourself. It will mean a lot for the Muslims. And then he started sending letters to also, North Africa, Morocco, and right? Help. And he says, Al-Kufr a'an al-Kufr, afala yu'in al-Islam al-Islam. Those people, the United Kingdom and France and Germany, they fight. In the medieval times, they were not in good terms. Those are enemies. He said, look, Kufr, disbelievers who used to fight united against us. Shouldn't the believers unite to fight them? Forget our differences. It's like, this is a battle of, it's not me against this. They're united. And it's about Jerusalem. So he started sending letters everywhere. So the letter to the king, or like the Khalif, it was Nasr li Dinillah. That's the Khalifa of the time. Nasr li Dinillah ruled for 47 years, unfortunately, and wasn't good. Maybe we'll describe him in the next series. His rule was not good at all. And they say سيء الخلق قبيح السيرة, فرض المكوس والضرائب. You'll see, he's a very, very wicked person, right? So his response to Salah ad-Din was the following. He sent a letter back to Salah ad-Din with two things. You did not send the letter to me with one of your great emirs. That's one. Two, how dare you call yourself Al-Nasr Salah ad-Din? Salah ad-Din has a title, which was given to him long time ago by the Fatimi. Remember when he was a wazir? And the Khalifa got him and said, Anta al-Nasr. He gave him that title. Now, Al-Khalifa's name is Al-Nasr. So he's Al-Nasr, meaning what? The one that aids and brings victory, right? So he said, you call yourself Al-Nasr? I'm Al-Nasr, not you. Right? And then he tells me, who do you think you are? You achieved nothing. Jerusalem and everything you did with my help and with my soldiers. It's like, and the letter reached Salah ad-Din. And the amazing thing in this, and I have to highlight this, the response of Salah ad-Din to the Khalifa, when you read the letters, wallahi, it's like, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the clemency and the patience of this man. Right? Because you can get upset. What, Khalifa? And you know what he said? His soldiers? And then he looked and said, where are they? Where are they? What soldiers? Later in time, right, when the Mongols are attack Baghdad, and he would start gathering his troops to face the Mongols, right? Jaysh al-Khilaf al-Abbasiyya, right? You know how many people he gathered to face the Mongols? 800. This is how weak things were, right? So right? And by the way, other rulers like Jalal ad-Din of Khawarizm, they used to actually be in a very bad term with the Khalifa, and they would try to attack him and he would attack back, Salah ad-Din wasn't this way. Salah ad-Din, you see how he speaks to the Khalifa. You read the letters. First he says, he's Al-Mamluk, your servant, by your grace and by Allah's help, is sending you a letter to inform you that Allah has granted him a victory. May Allah, keep you strong, and may Allah, and he would speak as if the Khalifa is the one, So he would give him that. So he responded in such kind of a manner, very kind, and why? I just want to why do you think that's the case? Any guess? Unity, right? And the Khalifa is a symbol. Right? It's not good to waste the energies of the... If you try to fight the Khalifa of the Muslims, it's going to be a fitna. This is one, right? It's a huge, huge fitna. And he wants to what? He's the Khalifa after all. Yeah, he's a puppet, but he's a symbol. And the reverence for the Khalifa, he wanted the people to have reverence for, I know it's a symbol, but have reverence for that. It's important, right? So that was Salah ad-Din's vision. So that was the first letter. The second, he sent to Morocco, he got the same response. Like the Sultan there was offended. Why? In your letter to me, you did not say that I'm Amir al-Mu'mineen. What is Amir al-Mu'mineen? It's the Khalifa title. So when you addressed me, right, you address إلى الملك or Sultan, right? You said Sultan, you said, where is Amir al-Mu'mineen? Don't you acknowledge that I'm Amir al-Mu'mineen? So some people told him, yeah, Salah ad-Din, just tell him, ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, let him help. And he said, I can't. It will create a fitna. It's one khilafah, it's the Abbasi khilafah. I cannot do that. Right? So it ended up with what? No help is coming to Salah ad-Din. He would be left alone to face this. If you were in his position, what would you do? And this is what I'm saying. Many people will start compromising. Say, okay, khalas, you know what? Ya akhi, give them Jerusalem. I mean, spare me. If the Franks come and the Germans come, so it's all about Jerusalem, give them Jerusalem, right? And let them leave, and we're done. And you can say, hey, I tried my best. I couldn't do anything. Things are like, nobody's supporting me. But that's not who Salah ad-Din is. And that's what I'm telling you. This is almost an impossible encounter. And you see his resilience, right? Something interesting happened. By the way, this is a letter that Salah ad-Din sent, and this letter is one of the letters that I really like, because it applies to us today. So this is a letter that Salah ad-Din now sends to everybody, right? And I just want you to notice not just the letters and the words, his views, right? And he writes the following. He starts with, we hope in Allah Most High, to whom be praise, who leads the hearts of Muslims to calm what torments them and ruins their prosperity. Where is the sense of honor of the Muslims? The pride of the believers, the zeal of the faithful. And now I want you to notice this paragraph. Notice what he's saying. We shall not be ceased to be amazed at how the disbelievers, the Franks, for their part have shown trusts. And it is the Muslims who had been lacking in zeal. Not one of them has responded to the call. Not one of them intervenes to straighten what is distorted. And notice what he's going to say now. But observe how far the Franks have gone, what unity they have achieved, what aims they pursue, what help they have given, what sums of money they borrowed and spent, what wealth they have collected and distributed among themselves. There is not a king left in their land or island, not a lord or a rich man, who has not competed with his neighbors to produce support and rival his peers in the military efforts of this campaign. In defense of their religion, they consider it a small thing to spend life and soul. And they have kept their brothers supplied with arms and champions of war. And all they have done, all their generosity, has been purely out of zeal for him whom they worship in jealous defense of their faith. The reason I'm saying this, do you see anything negative about the Franks? Why am I saying this? There is no victim mentality. He didn't say, the Franks, they killed the Muslims, barbarians, horrendous. Do you see this? He admired them. He actually did. He's their enemy, but he's saying, look at them. Look at their dedication. Look at their strength. Look at their unity. Look what they achieved. Look how dedicated they are. Look at your enemy. And then he says what? The Muslims, on the other hand, the problem is not the enemy. The problem is not that they're strong. The problem is not that they're united. The problem is what? They're this way, but the problem is not them. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They believe in their faith and therefore they defend it. They're truthful people. The problem is the Muslims. We're weak and demoralized. They have become negligent and lazy, the victim of unproductive heedlessness and completely lacking in resolve and enthusiasm. Sometimes that's a problem. I live life, I'm heedless, things are good. I don't have any aspiration to the cause of Islam. It's not something big in my life. I'm just minding my business. I'm just minding my trade. I'm just living in my own. This is the case of the Muslims. That's what he's saying. If Allah forbid Islam should draw reign, there would be no one east or far who would blaze the zeal for Allah's religion or choose to come to the aid of the truth against error. And then he says, what? This is the moment to cast off this laziness, to summon from far and near all those men who have blood in their veins. And we are confident. Notice his tone. We are confident, thanks to Allah, in the help that will come from Him. And we entrust ourselves to Him in sincerity of purpose and deepest devotion. Inshallah, the disbelievers will cherish and the faithful will have sure deliverance. I would say many people responded to the call. You had people, people came from Morocco, people came from Libya, people came from Hijaz, individuals, maybe the rulers don't, but they responded. There was a flag. There was a flag that you can fight under. This is very important. Who are you going under? What flag are you fighting under? There is a flag, supported by scholars, supported by a righteous cause. So people started flocking to him. There is a system, right? And which strengthened him, right? But nevertheless, things were like, it seemed impossible, right? Now, at this point, Salah ad-Din receives good news and bad news together, right? Starts with the good, good news, right? Unexpected news come to him. And again, people are worried. What's going to happen? Said, well, the German campaign. What happened? Did Taqi ad-Din meet them in battle? What happened? News came. The emperor, like the king, Frederick Barbarossa. Different accounts, I'm saying one account. On the way, there was a river. And he decided to bathe for a change, right? Just let's bathe in the river. Said he went into the river and he drowned, right? But here is the most amazing thing. When that happened, his children and his commanders started disputing and fighting among each other. Most of them decided that the campaign is over and they left and headed back to Germany. Only 10,000 to 5,000 remain. And you look at this and say, like, that does not make any sense. How? Right? By our worldly calculation, it does not make any sense. But what do you see here? Allah spared them. Right? Allah controls the hearts of people. And it was a fitna. Would you trade off? Would you give them Jerusalem? Would you trade off? Would you trade off? And when he saw the sincerest of devotion, that the man put all his effort down, he took all the means. All the means. It's not, let's fight. And all the means were taken. Everything is, and the sincerity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervened. And Allah controlled, yes, the king dies, and the campaign dispersed. Only 5,000 of this German campaign reached Akka with the son of the king, which is not a major number at all. Before I stop, the bad news. Salah ad-Din receives another letter and he falls into tears in front of everybody. And people are like, what happened? And he starts reading while he's crying. Taqi ad-Din, his nephew, died a natural death. He was sleeping, not the assassins, not in the battle. He's a young man. And he just passed away. And Salah ad-Din loved this young man. This was one of his top commanders, right? And he later would say, Taqi ad-Din was with me, what you're going to see next would not have happened, right? Taqi ad-Din is a person that with 1,000 defeated 10,000, right? And the Sultan was in tears. And it was Baha'u'ddin ibn Shaddad who even told him, Ya Salah ad-Din, people grieve. You do not have the luxury of doing so. You can't. Because the people are still in Akka. You don't have time to grieve. And said Salah ad-Din, when he reminded him, he said, Ya may Allah forgive me. Get some water, and just like washed his face and said, okay. He does not even have time for personal pain and grief because of the state of the Muslims. Now what would happen next? Salah ad-Din now is facing Akka under siege from all directions, and people are telling him what? It's time to give Akka away. What will happen next? Will Akka fall? Will Salah ad-Din win? What's the next chapter? Now you have Philip Augustus, Richard the Lionheart, they've arrived, right? The troops are all surrounding Akka, hundreds of thousands. Now it has been a year and a half in siege with nothing happening. That's what we'll find out, inshallah, after Salat al-Maghrib. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Somebody. It's okay. Yeah. That's okay. طيب. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أفضل المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. وبعد. So as we continue like with this episode, with this battle of Akka, right? We saw how difficult this challenge was for Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi and the Muslims with him. And as we said, and I'm trying to summarize because of the lack of time, right? So Akka became surrounded completely. The only way to supply Akka was from the sea. And I did not discuss the naval operations in the time of Salah ad-Din. But eventually, the Egyptian Navy troops could not break the blockade. With so many ships arriving from Europe, Akka was finally, even from the sea, it was cut off. And the supplies started to dwindle in Akka. And Salah ad-Din and his troops had to devise very interesting mechanisms, right? So we have stories. So we have a story of his troops getting a ship and then getting some of their men and asking them to shave their beards. Why? And then wear crosses and get some pigs, put it on the ship, right? And then sail. So like the Franks would see a ship with a cross and people like shaved because the Muslims had a beard at the time and but and then with pigs on it and they would pretend to be Franks and they would come to and then they would pass there was very interesting techniques, right? There are many operations of how did they supply Akka at that time. But I would say the following. I don't have time to go through the details of the blockade and a year full of fighting between two troops, but I'll give you one or two so that we'll have a taste of it, right? So at one point they say people were very distressed. The Franks, winter time, they weren't having resting. They used the winter time to build 3 towers. And each tower was 5-story high. I just want you to imagine, a huge, giant tower, right? And they filled it with men. And they covered it with vinegar and stuff to prevent it from being burned by Greek fire, basically. And they filled the 3 towers with men and they started pushing them towards the city of Akka. And Salah ad-Din started attacking from outside. They blocked the attack and the towers now are getting close to the city. And people realize if those towers reach the city and they open, it's done. And Qarakosh inside the city was extremely distressed because no matter what Greek fire they used, they could not burn the towers. And it is said there was one young man that came for Baha'u'ddin Qarakosh and he said, I can destroy the towers. And it is said Baha'u'ddin Qarakosh was very upset at this young man. Basically, my specialists, my engineers, people with experience, and you were a young man, it's just I don't have time for you kind. And people told him, let him be, maybe Allah will bring victory on his hands. Now this young man used to love to study chemistry before this. And he used to spend his time with combustible materials, chemicals and things like that. And he said, you do exactly what I told you. Get this and get that, mix this and mix that. And he prepared the liquid. And it was transparent. And he told them, put it in your trebuchets and throw it at the towers. And he's like, okay. So they started throwing those liquid, containers, if you will, and it looked like water. So to said the Franks started to laugh at the Muslims. They're throwing water at us, right? So they started laughing. And then he made sure that all the 3 towers are soaked with this liquid. Then he told them, now throw your fire at them. And they said they threw at the first tower, it exploded, right? And when the Franks saw this, the people in the second and third tower started jumping out of and they succeeded in destroying the 3 towers. So it was one young man, because of his interest in science, that saved the city because of this. And this is just one story. There are many stories like this, right? And there are many commando operations. Nevertheless, things were getting desperate. Salah ad-Din could not supply the city, attacks day and night. And then finally, Richard did something which is, and by the way, this is a letter from Al-Qadi al-Fadil, which is, I'll leave it for now. Let me discuss it later. Richard decided to do something really interesting. The way siege engines are, trebuchets and catapults, Muslims used to build a lot of them, like 20, 30, 40, right, to throw stones. Richard built one. So instead of building many, he said, no. He spent months on building one giant trebuchet. It said it's like, again, 5 stories high. Basically, it doesn't throw a rock. It throws a rock. You get the idea? So one mega trebuchet that stores like you throw 1 ton of a rock. I've seen a video, somebody tried to replicate this kind of trebuchet, and he threw a Volkswagen car with it. Just imagine like the strength and power. It's a giant one, right? And when the Muslims saw this trebuchet, they kind of were like very worried. And indeed, he started, and he told them, focus on one spot only. Do not keep firing at random. Focus on one area of the walls of Akka. And they kept bombarding that area. And the stones were so big, the walls started to crumble. And the Muslims started to what? They the wall gets destroyed, they start to rebuild. And the wall gets destroyed, and they started to rebuild. But eventually, they couldn't. And a breach happened in the wall of Akka. And at that point, Baha'u'ddin Karakosh and the people inside, they were really worried. So they started to send to Salah ad-Din, we're out of supplies, we're out of food, the wall has been breached, right? And it has been 2 years. And there is no hope. So give us permission to negotiate. We'll negotiate, something, maybe they'll spare us. Basically, negotiate a surrender of the city. Maybe we give them the city, they let us go free. Let's do a deal, at least we save ourselves the city. Basically, I cannot defend the city anymore. I don't have supplies, it has been 2 years, it's time to be real. And Salah ad-Din was very offended, it said. And he kept telling his soldiers, no negotiations whatsoever. No surrender, we will free the city. And tomorrow, we're going to attack. Everybody in his camp, the military leaders, were of the opinion it's impossible. The situation is impossible. You could not supply the city. The numbers are overwhelming. They made a breach. The city is falling anyway, right? So it's useless. They kind of gave up kind of. And Salah ad-Din at this point was almost the only one among his commanders. Still what? No, it's not. We will do something tomorrow. And as they're speaking, the next day, they saw the Frankish flag go on top of the city of Akka. The city fell to the Franks, right? What happened is the people inside Akka negotiated a deal with Richard. And they kind of told him, if we give you the city, would you allow us to go free? We've been kind to you before. Remember we let you go. So khalas, we'll give you the city, and if we do that, will you allow us to go? And it is said Richard was very disturbed. Remember, this is Europe. Europe is fighting Salah ad-Din. How long did it take? 2 years, and they could not take one city. I just want you to think about 2 years, the whole unified army of Europe fighting, not as one city didn't fall. So Richard was extremely disturbed at the Salah ad-Din and this force. He expected it to be much easier than this. So also their morale wasn't that great. Hundreds of thousands of people died, as you'll see later, and they could not get one city. I mean, what about Jerusalem? So at that point, he said, indeed, if you give me the city, you go free. So they made a deal. And Richard entered the city, and Salah ad-Din sees the flag of the Frankish flag on top of the city. It is said Salah ad-Din was like a mother who lost a son. He was in tears. Really, his heart was broken. It is said all his soldiers, everybody was in tears. 2 years, and finally the city fall. It was one of the most distressful moments in the lives of Salah ad-Din. And Ibn Shaddad again comes, and he tells him, Ya Sayyidi, there is no time for this. You have to put your mind to where the benefit of the Muslims are. Now we have to see what happened to the people inside. And he says, yes, indeed. So where are the people inside? You think Richard let them go? The answer was nope. You give me 100,000 dinar before I let you go. So he sent to Salah ad-Din, your 3,000 people are with me, and now I need you to give me the true cross that Taqi ad-Din got in the Battle of Hittin. I need to give you 100,000 dinar. He started what? Negotiations. Salah ad-Din's response was what? Fine. But how do I know that if I give you 100,000 dinars, how do I know you're going to release those people? You get the idea? There is no word here. So what guarantee do I have? It's a huge sum. You can just take it and do nothing at the end. And then he said, okay, maybe I should give you some and you release some. And the answer is nope, you give me all the money and I'll decide. And he sent to the religious people in the camp of the Franks, give me your word as religious, people in the camp, your religious word, oath, that if I give him the money, he will give me the prisoners. And they respond, we cannot guarantee our leaders. We can't even give you that word, right? Which tells you a lot, right? We don't know, right? So Salah ad-Din starts sending to him, fine, it takes a lot of time to get this money, and I need to see how are you going to do this deal, right? And to his surprise, Richard opens the doors of Akka, and he sees the 3,000 prisoners coming out in chains, and then he orders the knights to attack and kill all of them in front of Salah ad-Din. And he said Salah ad-Din this was one moment he was angry. He was furious. After all, you know how clement he was with them, how forgiving he was with them. Look at this, right? So he was really upset at what happened. Really angry, really furious, right? Really sad. And Baha'u'ddin came and told him, Ya Sayyidi, وَعَسَى أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Sometimes you hate something and it might be good for you. He said, it has been 2-3 years we're fighting around Akka and we could not dislodge them. But perhaps when the city falls, that will force them to do what at the end? They have to leave. They need to go to Jerusalem, right? Once they leave this fortified position and they go into the open, maybe we can have another battle. A battle in the open. Like the Battle of Hittin. And maybe then we can finish them off. And therefore, it's not necessarily bad. You get the idea? Yes, they took the city, but maybe that forces them out. We can finally have a battle, and maybe that's it, and Allah relieves us. So Salah ad-Din, again, seeing that, he said, yes, you're right, gather the troops, gets his army, now about to leave Akka, prepare. And on the way, Ibn Shaddad describes something really interesting. He said, as the Sultan is moving with his army, a Frankish woman comes in tears, crying and yelling. And Salah ad-Din, I want you to understand what he's feeling. How he is at this point, right? And how upset and angry and anguish. And by the way, the battles, just to tell you how difficult those battles were. At one point, when the Franks reached they have ditches around a way of fortification of any city. Not only the walls, you have a ditch in front of it. So when a moat, but it's not water at the time, right? So it's like a ditch, right? So the Franks to cross, they got dead bodies, their bodies of their dead and dead horses, and they build a bridge off it. They throw it in the ditch so they can walk on it. Baha'u'ddin had to open the gates, go outside. A part of the troops would stop the Franks, another part would jump into the ditch, cut the dead bodies, and throw them out. Can you imagine it? Summer, it was agony. And Salah ad-Din passed through all this, right? And it's really difficult for him. And now he's leaving, and this woman comes rushing, so he stops the army. And I want you to notice this. He stops his army, says, what's going on? Why is that woman crying? So people go and they say, well, she's asking for you. This Frankish woman is coming to our camp asking, where is Salah ad-Din? And he says, okay, bring her forth. What does she want? And she says, yesterday, some Muslim thieves came to our camp. And they kind of stole my young baby child. And I could not do anything. And I went to our kings, Richard and Philip, and said, please help me. Some Muslim thieves came and they stole the baby and my son. And she said the following, our ruler said, we cannot help you, but go to Salah ad-Din, go to the Sultan of the Muslims. He is compassionate and he will help you. Just think about this. And Salah ad-Din says, okay, I know exactly what's going on. They probably took the baby. They're going to go to the marketplace, try to sell a slave. So he orders some of his troops, go directly to the marketplace and go find that baby. And he tells the woman, please sit down, gets her something to eat, and it said 1-2 hours later, they see the soldiers of Salah ad-Din, his knights coming with the baby on their shoulder. And the woman recognizes her son. And said she hugged her son, started kissing him, pointing to the Sultan, Salah ad-Din, pointing to the heavens, and then making dua for him. What do you see here? It is said everybody in the camp was in tears. The scholars, everybody was crying. And Ibn Shaddad says, look at this rahmah. Look at this compassion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala filled his heart with. He's a fighter. But war did not change him. He didn't have PTSD and he became a murderer. And what can I do? I went to Vietnam. It's difficult, right? I'm not undermining it. I'm not at all. Really, PTSD is very real. But this strong faith with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the resiliency you get, despite what happened, despite their treason, he's still compassionate to a Frankish woman. He still stops his army and still serves her. This is why, in my view, this is victory. This is one of the greatest victories of Salah ad-Din. How you don't lose yourself. And this is why his enemies testified to him. They know very well who Salah ad-Din is. This is why up till today, when you speak about Salah ad-Din, even with non-Muslims, very respected. This is a figure that they had problems, by the way, later on, because the Franks later on couldn't interpret this. Remember, Muslims are infidels. How do you explain Salah ad-Din? So some of them said, no. His mother was a Frankish queen that Nuruddin Zenki captured her. And then Salah ad-Din came because of his... They just have to do something, right? He was very romanticized, right, like in that time. But in any case, that shows you the real character of who Salah ad-Din is, right? So eventually the city fell, right? And this is a letter by Al-Qadi al-Fadr to Salah ad-Din that is actually, the letters that the scholars wrote to Salah ad-Din are a lesson by themselves. Wallahi, like you read them, it's just very, very powerful. He writes something to Salah ad-Din, and it's really interesting. He first tells him, all those nights, all those days that you stayed up for the sake of Allah, that you struggled, while others were sleeping, it's a favor from Allah on you. Don't you see that Allah's the one that while all the Muslims are doing nothing, He selected you to be the one defending Islam? That's a favor that Allah has on you. Those days and nights of difficulty will be the jewels of your crown on the Day of Judgment. Those will be the things when you go and meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will see them as the gems. So be very grateful and thankful for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He made you, He chose you to defend Islam and let others down. So be grateful for Allah. And then he says something really, really powerful that really affected me a lot. He says the following. He says, for me, when I saw you victorious in the Battle of Hittin, and I saw you victorious and you liberated Jerusalem, I saw that victory did not lead to arrogance. I saw that victory kept you humble with humility and compassion. And I was so happy with that. Now, when I hear that the distress and letdown by different people in your troops and people not wanting to fight, and I hear of the difficulties that you're facing, yet I hear that you're patient with other people. You're forgiving them. You're still smiling. You're still having good character with them. That makes me thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is victory. When Salah ad-Din was sick, it's in this situation. Remember in the epidemic and around Akka, right? It is this situation where we had the story of the servant. Salah ad-Din is sick, remember in Akka, the epidemic, right? And in that midst of what's going on, he asks for water. Can I have some water, please? And one of the servants comes and gets some water to Salah ad-Din, and he trips and he spills it on him. And it is said it was very hot. And the Sultan is what? He's sick. And said it really hurt Salah ad-Din. And people were like, khalas, this guy, he's the Sultan. You know when you have a difficult day and your son messes around and you just, what do you do, right? And Salah ad-Din was sick, tired, exhausted, having all this distress, and this clumsy guy just spills it on him. And he's the Sultan. And people said, man, the guy is gone. And this servant was scared. And Salah ad-Din looked at him and said, can you make it colder, please? It's like that. Alhamdulillah, right? So the guy goes inside, comes outside with, let's say, ice cold water. And then guess what happened? He trips and spills it on the Sultan again. The second time. And it is said hot water followed by cold water. People said the Sultan almost died. It was and people were said that, what do you do to this guy? Like twice? Yeah, you deserve it, right? And the guy was really, you can imagine what he's going to, this is the Sultan, right? You're going to get punished. So Salah ad-Din looks to him and he says the following: if you want to kill me, let me know and do it quickly, please. What do you see here? Right? See, those things, I mean, those gems that you find in the character, this is not something you can make up. It shows what a state of a heart. That while you're struggling, only a heart with utmost peace with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do this. With all this difficulty, he recognized what this is actually from chivalry. They teach this, scholars of the time. The first level of chivalry is what? ترك الخصومة والتغافل عن الزلة. Overlooking people's slips and mistakes. So you don't put people in a corner that they have to apologize. Chivalry is if you're a good person and you slipped, I kind of overlook it as if I didn't see it. In a way, you don't even have to say sorry. And Salah ad-Din used humor to remove the anxiety of a person. In a moment where he himself is under emotional distress and physical distress. And that tells you a lot about who we're speaking about. And that is what Al-Qadi Al-Fadil was saying. To see the Sultan, despite what's going on, his character is still forgiving, calm, kind, smiling. For me, I'm happy to receive those news. Like receiving the news of your victory in the battlefield. That is victory. You see the idea? He's reorienting the Sultan. What do you look at? With you and Allah. If you're this way, it doesn't matter. You're winning. You're good with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Now, the next episode is what? Now, the Franks took Akka. The second step is, okay, they're not here after 2 years to take Akka. It's about Jerusalem. So now the journey starts, the way to Jerusalem. The Franks have to leave Akka and start heading towards Jerusalem. Jerusalem now is under threat. And of course, some people go to Salah ad-Din and what are they telling him? Give him Jerusalem, ya akhi, khalas. You tried your best. We're done. Has been years. Just give him the city and negotiation. Let it be compromise. Right? And now Richard starts moving. Now Jerusalem is inland, as you see. Before he can take Jerusalem, there is one more city he has to take, which is the city of Yafa. Right? Remember, you have to get the portal city first, then go inland. So they realized Richard is going to head towards the city of Yafa. Salah ad-Din's plan was what? Once he goes into the open, leaves the city of Akka, that's where we should have a battle, fight, right? And the favorite technique of Salah ad-Din and the Muslims at the time is what's surrounding, right? Cutting your lines of supply, that's the favorite thing. Richard, being a very good strategist, he had a very interesting idea. He said, we march by the beach. Stick to the beach. Why? So that I cannot be encircled. So as he's moving by the beach, he orders the ships of the Franks to be on the sea, on the Mediterranean, right? So you cannot outflank, you cannot encircle him, right? And you get supplies by the sea. If somebody's injured, you can go to the ships and you take him back. And you start marching this way. Do not leave the beach. And then he actually structured his army, people with full shields on the outside. And then, the horsemen, and then people resting inside. And they're walking with their shields because Salah ad-Din arrows and attacks are consistent, right? And Salah ad-Din made their life miserable. This march is like a day or two between Akka and Yafa. It took 14 days, and 2-3 weeks, because attacks were consistent day and night. But Richard refused to engage with Salah ad-Din. Salah ad-Din is doing what? Like attack and just come out. He attacks and retreats, meaning what? Follow. Richard's command was, do not follow any of his troops. If they attack, just block. If they start running away, do not leave your position. Do not go further inland. Stick by the beach. And it was a crawl, but he was very resolve. I'm going to do this no matter how long it takes. And Salah ad-Din realized, this is not working. He's not taking the bait. So he decides in a place called Arsuf to lay a trap for Richard. And Arsuf, so this is the beach. Arsuf has an area with trees in it, forest and the trees. And Salah ad-Din, the decision was maybe that's a good place where you can hide your army, kind of, right? And then if you can attack Richard and you can bring them out, right? Maybe then we can surround them. So he laid a trap, basically got all his forces, put them there. And he said, once they reach Arsuf, we're going to attack, right? and then force them in. So when they attack back, we retreat. They leave the beach, then we surround them, right? Which is a typical technique. He wants to cut this beach, like side. He wants to surround the troops. So that was the idea of the Battle of Arsuf. So Salah ad-Din prepared his troops, right? And again, the Franks come in their formation with the knights in the center, right? With the infantry, with their shields, protecting them from the way from the side, the ships by the coast. And Salah ad-Din divides his forces. And Salah ad-Din, he has, and this is maybe a good time to speak about this. Remember, he has the Mamluks, his special forces. And this is, again, a part where you start seeing the Muslim heavy cavalry. Those Mamluks of Salah ad-Din, highly trained. And they match the Franks in terms of what? Heavily armored. They know how to charge. They can withstand the Templars and the Hospitallers. It's the heavy cavalry of the Muslims, right? Very special troops. So Salah ad-Din had those, and they were in the center. So he sent the light cavalry. What's a light cavalry? It's mounted archers, people with the bow and arrow, lighter, and they're much faster with the horse, and they come very close to you, release their arrows, does a little bit of skimmerish, you attack, they retreat. The purpose is what? Come out. You see the idea, right? And he has his, what we call light cavalry, mounted archers. And he started sending those towards the Franks, right? So they started attacking. And then they met the infantry of the Franks. And of course, they did very well against the infantry. And they started crushing them. And the Franks started getting defeated. And the infantry started retreating. And they started, putting the sword in them, right? And then those mounted archers starting, firing their bow and arrow. And some of them dismounted so that they're more accurate, right? And they started chasing the Franks. And the attack was the heaviest on the rear side. They wanted to repeat the Battle of Hittin, slow the rear, right? Attack from the back, so that they pinned this. And this was the Hospitaller Knights. And the attack continued, right? And they did really well, and they pushed the Franks, and the Franks started retreating. The interesting thing here that happened, which is very interesting, it played against the Muslims. The Muslims, maybe because of the frustration, I guess, they lost discipline, meaning what? They started chasing. So the Franks started retreating, and the Muslims did what? Run after them. Dismount, run after them, go in and in and in. Now, the Hospitallers wanted to charge, and Richard gave a signal, do not charge. Let them in. Let them in. It's the opposite plan. Let them in. It was supposed to work the opposite way, right? But the Muslims now were just like, let's get done with it, right? We're pushing them, and they started to do what? Go inside, right? And they started to dismount, shoot, and at that moment, Richard gave his signal. All the knights of the Franks at once charge immediately, right? And the Hospitallers charged. Those light archers, mounted, they're not fit for this. They're not in cohesion. They're chasing, right? And they could not withstand such kind of an organized punch, right? And it said the Muslims fell back. And the Franks started again, they could not sustain this. And heavy casualties starting to happen. And Ibn Shaddad reports, I was in the center with Salah ad-Din, where I saw those mounted archers and the cavalry running back, and Salah ad-Din again, same thing, giving orders for them to stand their ground. And he said, I left the center and went to the left side. And I saw the same situation with his brother standing, telling everybody and people are running away. And the Franks are just charging, and the Muslims are running in complete disarray. Salah ad-Din, all what he could do is trying to bring the people to have some kind of cohesion. I think what saved the day was the heavy cavalry that Salah ad-Din had. When he ordered them to engage, it lightened the battle a little bit. They could withstand, so they slowed this down. But eventually Salah ad-Din realized what's going on, right? Especially now the heavy cavalry got involved, as I said. So he orders his troops to do what? Back up. So the heavy cavalry went in front, and all those troops started going back. And they started going back to where the trees are, the forest, right? And it was it looks like he lost 10,000 people that day. And that was a very significant number for Salah ad-Din, right? So as they're retreating, things look bad. But also remember, if the Franks follow, remember the days of Akka, we can turn things. But Richard gives an order. Stop. Stop. Do not go after Salah ad-Din. He's going into that forest, that can be a trap. Do not return back. Leave them alone. Right? He's a very good strategist, right? And that's what happened. So the troops retreated and refused to engage the Muslims further. Right? This is the Battle of Arsuf. And it's said, Ibn Shaddad says, Salah ad-Din was so grieved and he spent the night taking care of the wounded. Next morning, he said Salah ad-Din orders his troops to stand back, go out, ask for another duel. Right? He's not giving up. And again, you see this, it reminds me of the Battle of Uhud. Remember the Battle of Uhud when they went back and Allah did what? Go out and chase them, right? So Salah ad-Din went out and we're not defeated, we're not running away. I still have my army. Yeah, I lost 10,000, but the rest of the army is here. We're ready for you again. Richard refused to engage. Not taking the bait. I'm not leaving the shore. And he started gradually to charge towards the city of Yafa. People come to Salah ad-Din with the same suggestion they did with Nur ad-Din. We need money. We lost so many horses. We lost so many people. We need money. And you're giving money to those people in the masajid and the scholars and the students of knowledge, people are, give us this money so that we can fight. And what was his answer? The same answer of Nur ad-Din Zinki. Said, you want me to take money from people that fight for me day and night with arrows that never miss and give it to you, and your arrows may hit and miss. Their dua is how we get our victory. He refused to take, this is tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Those people, they're fighting like you. And I believe in their dua. That's how much he believed in dua. This is easier said than done, right? But that's who Salah ad-Din was. And this, by the way, the Battle of Arsuf, there's a difference between the East and the West. You go to the West, oh, it's a major victory for Richard, and you go to our Muslim sources, they don't see it this way. They say it is like a kasra. It's like, yeah, it's a setback, but not a major defeat. Salah ad-Din had his, so they don't speak about it as a major defeat of Salah ad-Din. They don't. They say like, yeah, he didn't do well, but it didn't break him. His army is still there, right? And he still consistently harassed Richard. At this point, it was clear to Salah ad-Din that the target is Yafa. What should he do? And gathering his troops and specialists, if you will, and strategists, they said the following: we don't want the situation of Akka to repeat. If you attempt to go inside Yafa and to defend it, right, it will be like Akka. They'll surround it and we'll surround them another 2 years. He said, no. We want them to leave the shore. Right? So what should we do? He said, well, destroy the city of Yafa. They said the battle is about Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the battle. So let's focus on Jerusalem. For Yafa, go to the city, raise it to the ground. So when Richard comes, there is no base for him. Nothing is left. So what does he has now to go inside? If he goes inland, then we can start surrounding him. Then we can cut his supplies, right? And don't start defending the city. It will be a replica of Akka. Destroy it completely. And that's what Salah ad-Din decided to do. He starts attacking Richard, slowing him down. By the time Richard reaches the city of Yafa, he finds no city. And that's what he had to do. He destroyed the walls, he destroyed the city, and Richard was very disturbed. Takes him 2-3 weeks, and then he arrives, there is no base. Remember now, it's like you're speaking years, and what progress have you done? Nothing much to be said, right? And now Richard was really, really kind of distressed. So he sent a letter to Salah ad-Din. Negotiations. Right? This is now where the interesting part starts to happen. He's telling him the following: the Muslims and the Franks are done for. The land is ruined utterly at the hands of both sides. Property and lives on both sides are destroyed. This matter has received its due. All what we have to talk about is Jerusalem and the Holy Cross and the lands that we have. Now, Jerusalem is the center of our worship, which we shall never renounce, even if there were only one of us left. It's basically, give me Jerusalem. As for the lands, okay, leave for us Yafa and Akka, and you take the rest. Good deal? You know what I mean? The true cross, return it to me. Do this, and we'll have peace. And I leave, and khalas, we're done. Can we just please do this? If you were in Salah ad-Din position, what would you do? You understand, like, the frustration, you can see it here. He's saying, khalas, remember those are the people that said we're going to take everything? Where is that? Now it's like, what can you just, Jerusalem. And we leave. This will end. Those hundreds of thousands, this agony will leave you alone. Just, it's one city. Give me Jerusalem. Many people, politicians, will tend to do what here? You can, I'll give it to them when they leave, maybe I can take it later. Right? You know politics, right? How it is, a two-state solution. Not bad, right? You have this part, I have this part. We live in peace together. It sounds good, right? I'm the king and my seat is good and you don't attack me and we have a peace treaty. Salam al-Da'im wal-Shamil wal-Adil, right? Guaranteed by Europe and the Pope and the Khalifa himself. Right? So Salah ad-Din's response. Jerusalem is ours just as much as it's yours. Indeed, for us, it is greater than it is for you. For it is where the Prophet ﷺ came on his night journey, and it's the gathering place of angels. Let not the king imagine that we will ever give it up. For we are unable to imagine such a thing. He's telling him, La yutasawwar. I don't know if you understand that. He's saying, the idea of me giving you Jerusalem, I can't make myself imagine it. You know, imagination, you can imagine anything. He's saying, even in the realm of imagination, I can't even have it. It's unimaginable. Let alone to speak about this among the Muslims. No way. And notice at this. As for the lands, Yafa and Akka, right? Those lands are actually ours. They're not even yours. Your conquest of it was an unexpected accident due to the weakness of the Muslims at that time. While the war continues and Allah gives us strength, we will not leave a single piece for you. Basically, he's telling him what? It's not only about Jerusalem. There is no two-state. Every single city that you have, you took it because we're weak. I will not ever acknowledge that it belongs to you. You have nothing here. Zero. All of it belongs to us. I want you to just think about what I'm saying and think about the time he's saying this. This is not after Hattin. This is, you have Europe at your front door and they're coming for Jerusalem. But he's very clear what he's fighting for. He's very clear what his principles are. He understands why am I fighting. It's not about Palestine and Egypt and nationalism. It's not about that. It's about Jerusalem. It's about Al-Quds. It's about Allah. This is something is uncompromisable. The lands of the Muslims, it's uncompromisable. Call it whatever. Those lands were never yours. They're never yours. You can come and take it. The Crusaders, you know how long they stayed in Akka after that? 200 years. 200 years. At the end, what happened to them? It's what I say today. You know what 200 years is like? 2 centuries? Generations are there. What happened to them? Where are they? They got kicked out. Right? So today, when people come and say, it's my land and I've been there, I've heard it before. I've seen it before in my history. They came before. They took the land in the name of religion. And they stayed in it for 2 centuries. Then what happened? No? Qalawun. So like, that's the other chapter. When did the Crusaders finally leave? Right? That's another chapter. It's when the Mongols came. Remember the Mamalik, we're describing those young troops of, eventually they will grow so strong and they will form such a strong army, this heavy cavalry, right? They'll take the rule of Egypt and they will take it upon their shoulders to free all the cities from the Franks. And they would free Antakya, Tarabulus, and Akka, and it happened, right? Salah didn't live long enough to see it, right? But it happened. Not a single city was left for them, right? But it took 2 centuries. But you see, what he is clear about what. No, it's not yours. He knows. You can stay for 100 years. I will not give it up. It doesn't change anything, right? Anyway, so now Richard takes the city of Yafa. The problem now was, what is his next step? There is 2 possibilities. He has one of 2. One is to choose to go to Jerusalem. That's one path. What's the other path? He can choose to continue on the coast, which is the city of Asqalan. What's the problem with that? He can choose Egypt. He has a choice. Nobody says you have to go to Jerusalem. So he was like, where is he going to go? I need to defend two cities. I need to defend Jerusalem and Asqalan at the same time. People came to him and told him the same thing. We do not have enough troops. We cannot defend both cities at the same time. You have to pick. The only solution, you have to destroy the city of Asqalan. Same thing like Yaf. And Asqalan was such a big city. And he was like, I'm not going to do that. And they told him that's the only choice. Unless you want to leave Jerusalem to defend Egypt. The only tactical, good strategy, you have to deprive them of Asqalan. And indeed, that Salah ad-Din went himself, right, with his troops. And he said to Ibn Shaddad, Ibn Shaddad is born in Asqalan, by the way. And he told him the following, losing all my children is easier for me than demolishing one stone from the city of Asqalan. But what can I do? This is what strategy dictates. And this is what the best interest of the Muslims is. And I want you to feel the pain. This man that's that strong, you're destroying a Muslim city. But that's the only way you resist. Right? And again, you see the strength of Salah ad-Din and his determination. He does not give up. It's a battle of what? يا أيها الذين آمنوا اصبروا وصابروا ورابطوا. That's it. مصابرة, مرابطة. And he's doing this. Type. Here, a very interesting thing happened. Right? Richard, again, frustrated. Yaf is destroyed. Asqalan is destroyed. Salah ad-Din doesn't give up. War day and night. And he didn't even go yet to Jerusalem. So he starts what? Let's open negotiation with Salah ad-Din. So he tells him, let's negotiate. So Salah ad-Din starts sending his brother to negotiate with Richard. And eventually some kind of admiration happens. Richard was very fond of Salah ad-Din, the knights that's around him. His brother, he's so chivalry, he's so, And his brother was also fond of what? Richard is a good strategist, good warrior, tough. So a kind of, they're enemies, but there is this kind of admiration both ways. So Richard gets Al-Adil, the brother of Salah ad-Din, said, I have a proposal, I have a solution. I have a solution, we're going to end this. Would you agree to it? And he said what? He said, here is what I'm proposing. I'm proposing, I have my sister, Joanne, here, and you're the brother of Salah ad-Din. You marry my sister. And you're the king and she's the queen. And you both rule Jerusalem together. And we're all good. How about that? Peaceful. Solves the problem, right? Why not? Khalas, the city belongs to both of you, king and the queen, Muslim and a Christian, and you're together, and we stop. Alhamdulillah, khalas, good. What about that idea? So Al-Adil said, a good idea. Not bad at all, right? I get to be the king, I marry his sister, alhamdulillah, it sounds good, sounds reasonable. Right? And he says, yeah, I'm going to speak to Salah ad-Din about it. And he goes to Salah ad-Din and tells him, Richard said something, I think we have a solution here. This would work. He said, I marry his sister, I'm the king, she's the queen, and we rule Jerusalem together, and it's good. So that solves the problem. We're done. And he goes home, and we're good. Really, it works. And Salah ad-Din says, he's just joking with you. He's not going to do this. Of course not. He says, no, he was serious. He said, no, he's just making fun of you. No, he was serious. He really meant it. Right? If you are Salah ad-Din, what would you do? Of course, Salah ad-Din would say no, right? Salah ad-Din did something really interesting, game theory. He realized what's going on. Richard wants to play a game. He's giving Al-Adil something, the brother, something that he would like. Knowing that Salah ad-Din would say what? No. And if he tells him no, then Al-Adil will be upset. You see that? And then he would start making a wedge between them. And he starts playing on it. You see the political movement? So he wants you to say no. Do you remember game theory? He's doing something knowing you're going, actually I want you to say no. Right? So Salah ad-Din, to the surprise of Al-Adil, he says, okay, go tell Richard that I agree. Go ahead. Completely unexpected, you see. And this is again we have to be what? You don't give your enemy what they expect of you. So he gave him a completely unexpected response. Go tell him Salah ad-Din agrees, proceed. So he went and said, great news, we're done. My brother agreed. And Richard was like, okay, now what, right? Said, okay. So he went to his sister, told her, well, we have this proposal. And said his sister was so upset at him. She took a ship and sailed back to the United Kingdom. I was like, I do not get married to an infidel, you're out of your mind, right? And the whole deal fell, right? But you can see here like some political moves from Richard. The other thing that happened, Conrad, this guy of Sur, this Italian knight, he opened communication with Salah ad-Din, realizing that things aren't going well, and he knows that if Richard leaves, Salah ad-Din will go after him. So he said, you know what? He opened negotiation. He said, if I leave Richard and I go back to the city of Sur, can we have a truce? Meaning what? I leave, I'll take my troops back, we have a truce, you leave me alone, I leave you alone for 10 years. And Salah ad-Din, that was good. Why? Because it breaks the Crusaders' camp. You get a part of them out. So he opened the negotiation with him, they agreed, they said, fine, you leave, we have a truce, I leave you on Sur, but take the troops and leave Richard. Right? And this communication started happening, and what happened after that, can anybody guess? Sunday morning, right? Conrad goes to the church, right? After the church, he goes, and there is some, what do you call them, monks and, Christian monks that he knows in the community and what have you. And they ask, let's go eat together. Fine. He goes to eat with them. 2 of them gets the daggers out, and they stab Conrad to death. Assassins pretending to be monks. Remember the assassins, right? So he was assassinated. The question is, who did this? So and I want you to see the strategy here. Of course, what happened in the Christian camp, who's the culprit? It was blamed on Salah ad-Din. You see, so Richard is the one that did it, right? And it's very clever, because he gets rid of Conrad, and at the same time what happens? He tells his people, look at what Salah ad-Din did. You got the idea? If you're a Christian and you see one of your leaders being assassinated by Muslim assassins, and your enemy is Salah ad-Din, I mean, it's the assassins. So who would kill our leader? Who are we fighting? Salah ad-Din did it. Look at Salah ad-Din hired the assassins and he killed Conrad. Now you're more upset against Salah ad-Din. It makes sense. In reality, it's Richard. Later in his life, he was actually went on trial for this. He had actually to pay, and later on in his career. Anyway, so that deal fell off, right? It did not materialize. But now what happened? Richard has to go to the city of Jerusalem. Finally, he has to go inland. When this happened, things changed. Because now he can be surrounded. Salah ad-Din destroyed all the wells. And once he went to inland, he started to cut his supplies and started surrounding, attacking day and night, right? And it was really very difficult. And Salah ad-Din himself went to Jerusalem and said, I'm fortifying the city and I'm defending the city myself. Right? And numerous battles happened here. Salah ad-Din winning most of them. And Richard found it this is now, I'm surrounded, my supply is not clear, I have to go inland, it's not safe. Right? So things were not going well for Richard. And then, I'm going to skip this letter, right? As this intensifies, something really interesting happened, and this Ibn Shaddad describes. Richard approaches the city of Jerusalem, exhausted, right? And Salah ad-Din very distressed, because this is Jerusalem now, and he makes an oath, I'm defending the city myself, I'm inside, I'm not leaving the city, right? And Ibn Shaddad says, one night I went to the Sultan, for what? To study hadith as usual, and he said, I saw him very distressed. Right? And he looked to the Sultan and he said, I see that you're very distressed. I think you should sleep, kind of. You're exhausted and it's good to sleep. And he said, fine, khalas, I'll sleep. Ibn Shaddad says, I went back to my tent. I was distressed and anxious. I didn't sleep. Till it's about time for Fajr. I went back to the Sultan and I saw he did not sleep either. right? Because of his planning and sitting, and this matter is like heavy on him. So he told him, Ya Sayyidi, I have an idea. I have an idea. He said, here is what you do. Today is Friday, and we're inside Jerusalem. I want you to do the following. It's Fajr Salah. He said, I want you, give charity, make wudu, go to the Aqsa Mosque, right? Between Adhan and Iqama al-Fajr, in the Aqsa Mosque. Pray 2 rak'ahs, and in sujood, make dua and tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you expended everything you can, and you fully rely on Him. And if you do that, Allah's more than generous to let someone like you down. I want you to notice what he did. Juba, Aqsa Mosque, between Adhan and Iqama, that's a time for dua to be answered, giving charity, make dua when you're in sujood. You see, he's combining what all the ahadith of what istijabat al-dua. And he's saying, do this, take all this and do it in such a way, and Allah would respond to you. And he said he watched the Sultan going, giving charity, making wudu, going to the Aqsa Mosque between Fajr and making the dua in sujood. He said, I watched him in tears, and his gray beard, that he's old now. And he said, next day news came. The Franks stopped. And they started to quarrel among themselves, the French and the English, and the Templars and the Hospitallers, right? Should we do this or not? It looks impossible. We have to do it, the French says. And the Templars and the Hospitallers says, it's impossible. We're going to get surrounded, and we're not on the seaside. We can't. And Richard says, okay, give me a map of the situation. Give me a map of the city. And they describe the situations and the fortifications of Salah ad-Din. And Richard says this statement. And I want you to notice what he says. He says, this is a city that is impossible to take as long as Salah ad-Din is alive and the Muslims are united around him. It's not doable. It's impossible. And he says, if I attack the city, they'll attack me from behind. If I try, and they'll come out of he said, it's impossible. We're surrounded. We don't have any supply lines. We will not be able to take the city. It's an impossible mission. So we have, and they said the attack broke, and Richard left the city and returned back to the city of Yafa. Right? Now, things didn't end there. He goes to the city of Yafa and he leaves. He's going where? He's going to Beirut and says, okay, maybe I cannot take this direction. Maybe we can go north, right? So he takes some boats and he just sails north. What Salah ad-Din did is something amazing. He immediately tells his troops to leave Jerusalem. He goes and surrounds the city of Yafa. Remember the city that Richard took? Right? He built the fortification of it. Salah ad-Din takes his troops, built his catapults, and in 3 days, and I'm going fast, he succeeds in taking the city of Yafa. He breaks the walls and he goes inside of the city, right? And they send to Richard, and Richard comes back quickly, and then, right, comes back quickly to save the city of Yafa, right? He lands on the beach. Salah ad-Din is still negotiating with them, making a deal. They want to leave the city, and Salah ad-Din is saying, deliver the city, you go in peace, the usual thing, right? But Richard arrives. Once Richard arrives, Salah ad-Din does something really strange. Gathers his troops, leaves Yafa. Does not fight Richard. Why do you think he did that? You broke it. You went in, you're about to take the city. And now Richard comes back, he leaves and tells his people out of the city, we're going back. What's going on here? I want you to understand, if he takes the city, it's another act, right? You remember the battle is about what? Jerusalem. So he does not want to have some of his troops inside of Yafa and then get surrounded. Why did he do that? He's showing Richard something. Don't think you can leave. Don't think you can attack another city. The moment you leave, I'm always attacking you. You're going to leave again, I'm going to come back again and attack you. I'm going to put you what? You have to always be here. You see the idea? Right? And I'm not going to play this that I'm in Jerusalem. But at the same time, you cannot have peace as long as I'm here. Right? Richard writes this letter, like he sends this. He says to some of the people around Salah ad-Din, tell your sultan, the sultan of yours is a great man. Islam has no greater king, mightier than him. By God, he's great. By God, he's great. Your sultan is the greatest sultan that Islam has. I could not have imagined that he would take Yafa in 3 months. How did he take it in 3 days? And then he says the following, greet the sultan for me and say, for God's sake, give me what I asked for so that we can make peace. This is a matter that must have an end. My lands over the sea has been ruined. For this to go on is no good for me or for you. He's now trying to negotiate again, right? Now he starts negotiating with Salah ad-Din, and he tells him, fine, خلاص, okay, you can keep Jerusalem. You can keep Jerusalem. All what I'm asking is one thing. The cities that we took, Yafa, right, Asqalan, and Akka, leave them for me, and I will leave. Is that a good deal? You get the idea, right? خلاص, you keep Jerusalem, we're done. But just let's make an agreement. And Salah ad-Din insists, nope, no agreement. I'm going to take everything. No, I'm not going to leave you with a single city. And Richard starts, okay, what about Asqalan? خلاص, I'll give you Asqalan. You can take Asqalan. But leave Yafa and Akka for me. Just those two cities. And Arsufia, just those three cities. That's it. And I leave and we have a truce. And Salah ad-Din responds, no. Everybody around Salah ad-Din insisted. Scholars, knights, accept the truce. Accept it. He said, because what does it mean? You broke the third crusade. This third crusade was hundreds of thousands that came, failed. They could not take Jerusalem. All what they took is what? Yafa and Akka, we'll take it back from them. But make him leave. Make the kings leave. This is the end of the third crusade. And we need the space too. We need some break too. So please accept the truce. Salah ad-Din responds, and this is what he told Ibn Shaddad, right? Everybody unanimously told him, you have to accept this truce. And finally Salah ad-Din agreed. We will have a truce, and notice, not peace. We'll have a truce for 3 years and 3 months. And this is also very important. There is a big difference between peace, meaning what? I acknowledge that Akka and Yafa is yours, and you are. He never said that. There is a difference between a truce and a peace. What's the difference? Truce, I never acknowledge you. I never said this land is yours. It's a ceasefire. Meaning it's a temporary ceasefire. But I never said I acknowledge this is a. There is no acknowledgement of you at all. But we can have a truce. And it's time. So 3 years and 3 months. Right? So Salah ad-Din tells Ibn Shaddad this, and look at this. He said, there is a reason why I do not want to make peace with them. He said the following, I am afraid, I am getting older, and I don't know what will happen to me. And then he said, I know when I pass away, you will see them, pointing to his kids and other people. Each one of them will take one of the cities, and they will differ. And those Franks, they will be back. Those are very determined people. And I'm afraid that my own kids, when they will be back, they will be fighting among each other, and they will not hold a position against them, and we will lose everything again. And if you live long enough, you will see what I'm telling you. You get why he's afraid? You know what he's saying? He's saying, as long as they have the coastal cities, they will come. The problem is my descendants. I know what status and power does to people. I know one will take Aleppo and Damascus and Egypt, and they fight, and the Franks will come, and each one of them will sit in his city doing the same. As long as I'm good, it's okay. And they will take Jerusalem again. And he tells Ibn Shaddad, as I said, what? You will, if you live, you will see what I'm speaking about. That is why I'm refusing truce. But what can I do? This is what everybody told me to do. And finally, the truce was signed. Richard, before leaving, tells Salah ad-Din the following. After 3 years, I'm going to be back, and I'm going to fight you again. And Salah ad-Din says, and I'll be here waiting, and I'd rather fight you than fight anybody else. Why am I saying this? It shows you like they know what they're doing. They understand there is no peace here, right, in this situation. Right. What is next? So that the third crusade, in a way, is over. And for the first time, there is peace for 3 years. Salah ad-Din got all the lands, except for Akka and Yafa. He broke the counter-attack. Now it's victory. Not only he took Jerusalem, but the counter-attack was broken. Right? And Salah ad-Din is exhausted. It has been 17 years of fighting. He returns to Damascus, right? Has been long time he didn't go to Damascus. And the governor of Damascus meets him, greets him. People are so happy with him. And he shows him what? Ya Salah ad-Din, look at this. I built this mansion for you. You know, now your retirement, right? Your retirement plan. He says, look, I built this for you to retire in. And Salah ad-Din looks at the mansion and looks at the man and says, this is a place built for someone that does not think he's going to die. We were not created for this. We were created to serve Allah. And then he looked to the man. What money did you use to build this mansion with? The money of the Muslims. He removed the governor from power for doing that. He considered it a bad deed of his, not a good deed of his. You're building a mansion for me with the money of the Muslims? No, you don't. That's not how you get brownies, you know. No, that doesn't work. Right? That tells you about Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, right? I don't know how much time do we have. How much time do we have? Like 6 minutes. Okay. Right. There is many descriptions of Salah ad-Din by scholars, right? How great he was and how he's surrounded by other scholarly people and his patience. This is Muwaffaq ad-Din ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, one of the greatest scholars. He's describing Salah ad-Din, how he was building the fortifications of Jerusalem, discussing fiqh issues, how he's a role model for everybody else. People really love the Sultan, Salah ad-Din, for what he stood for, right? Now, after that, Salah ad-Din had one wish, finally. He's going to ask one thing for himself. He said, I wish for one thing. I want to do Hajj. Hajj. He never had time to do Hajj. All the war. Now there is a truce. So his request is what? I'm going for Hajj, finally. I never saw Mecca, I never saw Medina. I protected them, right? But I never saw them. And his heart is what? I want to see the Prophet ﷺ. I want to see the Kaaba with my own eyes. This is the Sultan. And the response of the scholars was it is haram for you to do Hajj. Why? Haram? Hajj is a farida. He said, because you're the Sultan. The Franks are still here. If you leave, they will betray the truce and they will attack Jerusalem. It's not permissible for you, knowing that they're there, to leave and for 3 months to go for Hajj and come back and leave the land. They will attack. So you have no right to do that. Your duty is to protect the Muslims. You're not allowed to go do Hajj. Can you imagine? And said the Sultan's heart was broken. It's all what he wanted. Hajj. And now my duty to the Muslims forbids me to do the only thing that I wanted to do. So I could not go for Hajj. And it said Salah ad-Din spent his time visiting the cities and preparing the way for the Hujjaj, right? Building again like things for them, making sure the roads are okay, you know. And I'm going to skip this. We spoke about this, right? As a matter of fact, he had a lot to do with the Hujjaj. Before Salah ad-Din, the tribes around Mecca and Medina, they used to use the Hajj season for what? Opportunity to make money. So they would oppress people, they would like try to take their money. Salah ad-Din was the one that did away with this. He would send a massive amount of grains to the chiefs of the tribes. So they're very happy because Salah ad-Din gives them grain for free. But then they would sell the grain to the people there. So the people get food and they get money, right? So he made Hajj very, very safe for people. Yet he could not go for Hajj with himself, right? Now, a part of the character of Salah ad-Din before patient, clement, as you saw, does not get angry except for Allah's cause. Very compassionate, very forgiving, tender, lenient, soft-hearted. This is how they describe him. Bravery. In the battlefield, he fights himself. In the battlefield, he's riding his horse everywhere. He's a powerful knight himself. A steadfastness and extremely high resolve, which you saw with Richard, right? How he does not give up at all, right? His love for the Quran. As we said, Quran, 2 juz, 3 juz every night. Quran is recited, Salah ad-Din is always in tears. Prayers and qiyam was his thing. He loved to do qiyam al-layl, he loved to pray in jama'ah. That was one of the strong points that Salah ad-Din's heart was really at. Never missed a... He said, it has been 40 years, I can't recall one salah I did not pray in jama'ah. Even in the battlefield, he had his imam and he said, for the last 4, it's not I missed a salah. You understand what he's saying? I can't remember one salah not in Jama'ah in 40 years. Right? So that's where he was. Nevertheless, another interesting thing happened, and this is an interesting story. All of a sudden, remember Baha'u'ddin Qarakosh, the one that led the defense of Akka? After the truce, Baha'u'ddin Qarakosh shows up. Salah ad-Din thought he's dead, right, among the 3,000 people. And apparently the Franks left him alive because he's the leader, right? And so he comes to Salah ad-Din, and Salah ad-Din was so happy to see him, hugs him, but he tells him, I have to go. Why? They released me with the condition that I have to pay them 80,000 dinars. And now I have to go get the 80,000 dinars and give it to them. What is so surprising about this? Yeah, they betray, yes. They agreed to release him, yes. But there is something here, I don't know if you catch it. So if you were Baha'u'ddin Qarakosh and they released you, would you really give them the 80,000 dinars? What would you do? No way, right? They betrayed in the first place, right? But notice what he said. I gave them my word. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go get the 80,000 dinars, give it to them because I said I'm going to do that. This is the character of a believer. We do not lie, we do not betray, right? Which is very interesting. Type. So the Sultan after that, and again, can I have more 5 minutes, if you allow me, just inshallah, 5 minutes? So it is said the Sultan, what he wanted is to see the pilgrims. Right? He could not go for Hajj. He said, at least let me welcome them on their way back. It is said he went out, it was cold, and he did not wear enough clothes. And he got some kind of a cold which turned into a flu. And he started getting a fever. And people were really worried because he said after all this, he was so old. He's in his 50s, but he looked like an 80 years old, right? All this fighting and tents and day and night and winter and summer and mud, and he said he aged quickly, right, because of what he was carrying. And his immune system, people were worried about. And he said he started to get a fever. And all of a sudden, they realized this is not going well. So they took him to Damascus, and the doctors came. And the Sultan started to fall into coma, right? He started to lose consciousness. And the only thing they said, he loved Quran. So they got a Quran reciter by the Sultan Salah ad-Din. And the Quran reciter said, Salah ad-Din would be in coma, right? Whenever he recites, and he recites the attributes of Allah, Wallahu Ghafurun Rahim. And Salah ad-Din would say, Sahih, Sahih, right? And he would go back into coma, right? And people were really worried. And they would visit him. And he said the public, everybody's asking about the Sultan, and Baha'u'ddin and Qadi al-Fadil were there. You know, and they said, we were very worried about his state. He's in a coma, and what is going to happen? And it's so distressful. Till one day, the reciter, again, was reciting a verse from the Quran. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. It is Allah, the one that there is no deity worthy of worship except Him. On Him I rely. وهو رب العرش العظيم. Said the Sultan smiled, and he gave up his soul. That was his last breath. We saw a light on his face. He smiled and he said, "True," and he passed away. And Salah ad-Din, you have to understand, this was the heart of people, right? And it is said, Shaddad describes, said this day, we did not see a darker day that befell Islam since the times of the Khulafa, since the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Said it was a dark day. Grief engulfed the whole city. People were about to die from sadness. This is how much people loved him. Islam never saw a day like this since the time of the Khulafa al-Rashidin. Men grieved for him as they grieve for prophets, for he was loved by good and bad, Muslims and unbeliever alike, right? And it is said, really, people would say things, I would give my soul if I can bring him back. And Ibn Shaddad said, I used to think this is an exaggeration till that day, because I would gladly give my soul if I can bring Salah ad-Din back. Right? He was so beloved to people. And then again, Ahmad al-Asfahani came with a poem about, this is again Arabic, I cannot translate it, right? Very beautiful poem, like about 100 and 150 verses. This is his writer, describing Salah ad-Din and telling who's for the orphans after you, who's going to take care of the needy, who's going to, like, where is the king, Where is the Sultan? The one that was so sincere to Allah, the one that defended Islam when everyone didn't. And he started saying things and everybody's in tears. If you read, if you understand Arabic, it's a very heart-touching point, right? People grieve the Sultan. And then their biggest surprise, they go to bury the Sultan and they discover Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi does not have enough money for his own burial. He does not, all his money has been given away. In the Battle of Akka, Salah ad-Din donated from his personal money 12,000 horses. 12,000. His money went to the women of Hattin. His money went to the poor people. So at the time of his death, the Sultan has no money for a shroud. And it was the scholars that came, al-Faqih al-Dawlahi, and like many of they came for the burial of Salah ad-Din. And it is said his funeral prayer started from, Dhuhr time all the way to Maghrib. People would come, pray and leave, pray and leave. It didn't stop. Everybody was in tears. People were so distressed. People they couldn't eat, they couldn't drink. And they felt it. And they said Christians were crying, Jews were crying, Muslims were crying, the Franks were crying. Everybody loved Salah ad-Din. But before he dies, he did something really interesting. When he died, the flag bearer of Salah ad-Din, the one that holds his flag, came out. And he said, the Sultan, before dying, he gave me a message for the Muslims. Okay. There. Just don't fall on this. He said, the Sultan, please. It's okay. You can play with it. He said, the Sultan asked me to come. And he said, you were the one that held my flag in all my battles with me. After I die, take my flag. Go to every single Muslim city. Tell people, gather people, and tell them this is the flag of the Sultan Salah ad-Din. The Sultan who ruled Egypt and Sham. The Sultan who had soldiers around him. The Sultan Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. But he died. And he took nothing from the life of this world except a shroud. Like this flag in front of you. And even that is going to disintegrate. What is the message of Salah ad-Din for the Ummah? Don't forget death. Don't forget death. It's not worth it. This is the Sultan. Everybody dies. And when you die, what are you going to take? What are you fighting over? The thing that kills Muslim. And he's hubb al-dunya. Don't get attached to worldly things. It's not worth it. You're taking nothing. I died, you're going to die. Remember your death. Remember your grave. Remember nothing is coming in with you. Not your family, nothing. Your good deeds, and that's it. His advice to his son was very powerful. He got his son, and this was very hard moving for me. And I imagined he would get his son and tell him what? Defend Jerusalem. Be careful. The Franks are going to be back. Stay united. Defend the city, right? Look at his advice. I advise you to have taqwa of Allah, as it's the source of all good. I command you with what Allah commanded you, for it's the way for your own salvation. I warn you from bloodshed or indulging in it. Blood never sleeps. Who's speaking about bloodshed? You know how many people died in the 200,000 on these hands? And he's saying what? Be careful. Bloodshed is not something little. Be careful from shedding the blood. Don't do that. Right? And then look what he asks. I ask you to protect. And I thought he's going to say, I ask you to protect Jerusalem. But he says what? I ask you to protect the heart of people. Protect the heart of your emirs. Protect the heart of Where is Jerusalem? Do not envy anyone. Death leaves no one. Be mindful about what's between you and people. For it will not be forgiven except if they forgive. As for what's between you and Allah, Allah is all forgiving. What is his advising his son? This is very powerful because this shows us something about the Sultan. Typically, we get attached to the means. If I built a masjid and I spent my life building that masjid on my deathbed, what do you think I'm advising my son with? Take care of the masjid. Take care of the masjid. But you know what? The masjid was for what? To please Allah. A person who's connected to Allah will tell his son what? Please Allah. Have taqwa of Allah. The masjid is one means for this. It's a means, but the bigger thing is what? Allah. And you can see that here. He's not telling him, son, Jerusalem. There is something more important than Jerusalem. What is it? The hearts of people. The Sultan's rule, or the Sultan's duty is before guarding their property, is to guard their hearts. I just want you to think about what does it mean to guard the hearts of people. Tazkiyah, scholar, ilm. Are you guarding the hearts of your people or not? That's more important than Jerusalem. That's what you look forward for. That's your duty. Please Allah. Jerusalem is one means for this. It's not about Jerusalem. It's about the Lord of Jerusalem. It's about Allah Himself. This is why we do this. Don't confuse the means by the goal. The goal is not Jerusalem. The goal is the pleasure of Allah. See how powerful that is? That's not something that, people can, this is on his deathbed, which tells you where the heart of the Sultan is really. Right. Right. Now, Al-Qadi al-Fadil says something really powerful. We'll finish here in 1 minute. He was so distressed, right? And he goes to the children of Salah ad-Din. And Al-Qadi al-Fadil is one that's very eloquent, writes letters, right? And he tells them, he's so distressed. As for advice, I'm so grieved to offer any advice. I can't speak it. But he says this, however, one thing is clear for me. If you stay united, the biggest calamity that we see will be the loss of the Sultan. If you differ, the children of Salah ad-Din, the least of our calamities will be the loss of the Sultan Salah ad-Din. You understand what he's saying? Things will happen that will be stay united, was his advice, right? And Ibn Shaddad writes, those were the days of the great Sultan Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. Those days passed. Long years, they feel like moments. And their long struggles like a dream that passed in a glimpse of an eye. And this is the story of the generation of Salah ad-Din and the Sultan Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, right? Quickly, the fears of the Sultan. We'll finish with this. What happened next? Was he right? Yes, the Franks did come back. And they came for Egypt this time. The fourth crusade was Constantinople, the fifth and the sixth and the seventh and the eighth. He kept coming back. And he was right. His children, guess what they did? They started fighting. And one of them to ask the Franks to help him against his brother by giving him Jerusalem for free. Jerusalem that they could not take by 600,000, 300 German knights took Jerusalem from the Muslims for free. It was given to them by one of the descendants of the Ayyubi, Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. Right? So that did happen. And Ibn Shaddad lived long enough to see that with his own eyes, unfortunately, right? And there indeed, darker times were coming ahead. The days that Ibn al-Athir would say, describes them as the condolences of Islam. Something was going to strike Muslims that, they didn't think about, right? So this really happened, right? The Mongols came. 40 years from the death of Salah ad-Din, the Mongol invasion happened. And cities fell. And the Mongols came all the way, conquered Baghdad, conquered Damascus and Aleppo. They went all the way to Egypt. Despite what happened, the institutions that Salah ad-Din built survived. You can have bad rulers. The schools, the scholars, the infrastructure was good. The Mamalik, those special troops, came to power, which is another episode. And they took control of Egypt. And they became the next generation, if you will, to stop the Mongols and defeat the Mongols and try to unify the Ummah again. And that's another chapter. The institutions of Salah ad-Din, the schools, the scholars, that survived. Despite the existence of bad rulers, those always was a rock. And I remind you with the word that non-Muslims said, and again, describing this period with the Mongols, the conclusion was, the madrasas saved Islam. The madrasas, not Salah ad-Din, those institutions that were built by Salah ad-Din kept alive, kept people coming up, another generation came. And they not only defeated the Mongols, they defeated the Franks and they kicked them all out, right? But that's a completely different chapter for another day, which maybe we'll speak about, which like the fight with the Mongols and what happened, very interesting. What about the assassins? What happened to them? The Mongols took care of them. It was Holako. that came, and very brutal, right? They actually assassinated some of the Mongol princes too, right? So there is a whole episode with the assassins versus the Mongols. This Mongol scourge that happened was very destructive war. It took the Muslim Ummah by surprise. Most of the lands fell to them, right? And people were really hopeless at the time. They considered this Ya'juj wa Ma'juj, basically, that we're done. This is how bad it was, right? But how those Mamalik stood back in power, what happened in Egypt. Egypt was even ruled by a queen at the time. For many of you do not know that. Very interesting story with love in it. And it's very interesting. Like, it's very, very interesting, right? With the Crusaders coming to Dumyat and their king. So that's a whole chapter, inshallah, that maybe we have in another series. So I'll stop here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. There are some lessons and discussions. You can read them in the slides. I don't have time to discuss them in this episode. So, jazakallah.